you doing? So one of the very first items that I added to my build list was a Volpo Octave keyboard, and I've now finally got a chance to make one. I've been trying to find an old organ for ages that's either cheap or free, and didn't need me to use a trailer to get it back home. And a few weeks ago, I saw one come up on the Facebook Marketplace for the princely sum of 20 bucks. And best of all, it only looked about the size of a small writing desk. So I'm now the proud owner of a Bellini 628 Osimo, made in, I don't know, 1978 probably. Featuring peeling laminated chipboard for the organ structure, perfect to blend in with my synth stand. Keys that are either out of tune or just don't work. Instrument switches that either do nothing or change the timbre very subtly. A vibrato control that does work. A nice crackly volume pot. An inbuilt drum machine with 7 different rhythms. The march, the cha-cha, the tango, the slow rock, bossa nova, go-go and the waltz. All controlled by buttons that look like they've come from your nan's heater. With its own tempo control as well. Real noisy inbuilt speakers. And it's all powered by this mains cable, looking ready to zap me at any minute. So it goes without saying, this thing needs a lot of work done to it. So my plan with this thing is to try and restore it to its former glory and make sure it's all working again. Then after that, I'm going to look at how I can make my own self-contained keyboard for the synth. It would feel like a shame to just desecrate this thing without at least enjoying it as a proper organ first. So I guess the first thing that needs to be done is to try and pull it apart to access all the circuitry. And then maybe try and fix some of the simpler things like these crackly volume pots. Alright, so I've gotten it into the shed and taken it off the stand. So now all I've got to do is just take off the bottom and see what electronics are inside and what can actually be repaired. Alright, so I've gotten all the screws out of the back, and as you can see it's got these hinges down the bottom. So what I'm hoping is that this whole thing will just sort of fold back, and hopefully reveal the electronics and keep all the keys in place. Oh god. Fucking chipboard. The shittiest wood to come out of the 70s, I swear. Ooh. Here we go. Oh, good lord. Oh, what a thing of beauty. Look at how perfectly laid out this all is. Oh, and they've even put the schematics in as well. They really knew how to make everything serviceable back in the day, I swear to God. Look at all like these tiny little diodes and stuff. Alright, let's get some close-ups. As you can see, it's just disgustingly dirty and dusty. So I think the first thing that needs to be done is to clean up the inside. There's like a dead little spider right in the corner here. So after giving it a good wipe, it's looking a lot cleaner at the back here. So after cracking it open and having a look at the electronics now, and having a good look at the schematics, I've now come to the conclusion I have no idea what the hell I am looking at. I'm very much doubting my ability to actually be able to try and restore this thing. Now I'm wondering if maybe I should just go straight ahead with converting it to a MIDI keyboard. Alright, so it's now a couple of days later. I've been talking to Ed from Elk Electronic. He's been very helpful in giving me some advice on how this thing actually works and some possible ways that I can repair it. From what I can basically gather, for each individual note from C through to B, there's 2 individual oscillators, with each oscillator then being sent to a frequency divider chip, which brings the oscillators down to the lower octaves. So underneath the top key bed, we can see this big long PCB along the bottom. And this is where the 12 individual oscillators are contained. And each of the individual oscillators are then wired to these yellow wires here, which is connected to this PCB underneath the key bed, which contains the frequency divider chips. And along the top, we can also see the common bus bar with all these little springs connected to each individual key. And these springs will either touch the bottom of the bus bar or the top of the bus bar. But with that being said, I've had to weigh up the cost versus the benefit of actually repairing this thing, or just going straight into converting it to a keyboard for the synth. And just looking at the sheer amount of work and circuitry involved in this organ, I don't think it's really worth actually trying to repair it, even with the schematics and all the advice I do have available. So I think the plan moving forward is to just go straight ahead into converting this either into a volt per octave keyboard or a MIDI controller. And considering that a volt per octave keyboard needs a lot of precision resistors to be able to deliver the exact voltage per key, I'm erring on the side of just making a MIDI controller and using an Arduino to control everything. So now that I've decided I'm going to convert this into a MIDI controller, that means that I need to work out which one of these key beds I actually want to use. And I'm thinking I might go with a lower one because I eventually want to create my own custom wooden case for it. And I don't want it to be raised quite as high as this top one is. So that means that the next stage is to try and remove this bottom keyboard from any unnecessary electronic circuits and just leave the keys and the switch mechanisms as they are. And then after that, I'll give this a thorough clean and begin looking at how we can convert this to a MIDI controller. And the plan after that is to then make a MIDI to CV converter, so then we can convert the MIDI signals to be able to control the synth. So the keys are now disconnected from the organ and looking much cleaner. So the next thing that needs to be done, underneath the key bed, we can see this massive wiring loom connected to this massive chain of resistors. But since we don't actually need these resistors, and we just want to make a connection between the keys, that means that each of these little connections needs to be moved down to where the spring is connected, therefore disconnecting all the switches from the resistors. So now that I've resoldered the wires, my plan is to connect a couple of the keys up to an Arduino, which will then read the status of each of the keys, and then convert that into MIDI signals. My friend Broden has let me borrow his Behringer Model D, so my plan is to connect the MIDI signals from the Arduino into the Model D to be able to confirm that the keys are actually working. So after several days of testing and soldering, I now have the first 12 keys wired up to the Arduino Nano, which is producing the MIDI signals for the Model D. So to be able to wire up the other 24 keys, that means I'm going to have to go and get an Arduino Mega, which has something like 50 digital input outputs, more than enough to handle the 36 keys from the keyboard. But I'm also starting to think about other ways that I can use the extra memory, such as introducing an LCD display to be able to show information about the keyboard such as the octave range of the keys. As you can see, each of the key wires is soldered directly onto a header pin, but this is just a temporary solution to keep all the wires separated, so I'm not getting phantom key presses from any of the other keys. But as you can see, it's made the header pin all wonky and wavy, so I'm trying to think of a better solution to keep all these wires separated from one another. So what I'm thinking of doing is separating all of these wires from the loom, and instead of connecting it to a header pin, instead solder it directly to a circuit board, which I can attach underneath to the keys here. And that way it'll be far less of a mess than whatever the hell this thing is. Alright, so I've now got a couple of circuit boards attached on the back of the keyboard here, with each of the key wires going directly onto the circuit boards and connecting to a header pin. And I've now bought an Arduino Mega, so that I can connect each of the key switches up into the inputs. So the next step is to get these all connected up to the Arduino and begin the testing phase and writing up the code. But to make my life a little bit easier, I think I might attach the keyboard and the Arduino to a bit of wood, just to be able to keep it in place and not have it jiggling around anywhere. So the keyboard and Arduino are now fixed to this bit of wood, which will make it 1,000 times easier for testing. So I think I might leave it at that for today's episode. But join me next time and we'll take a look at the extra features that I want to add to the keyboard and how we can actually code it all together. But until next time, I'll see you later.